Hey guys, Wildlife Studios here, and today I'm going to address, I'm going to make a part 3 of this RTXGI versus UE5S, software ray trace lumen and hardware ray trace lumen video. So a little bit to cover here. Basically, the intent of this video, I just want to like clear the elephant in the room. The intent of this video was to basically showcase a GI method in UE4 and an upscaling method in UE4 to assist with ray tracing, which also exists in UE4. TSR is not a thing in UE4. Like outside of TAAU, which both engines have, there isn't really an equivalent of an out-of-the-box epic upscaler. But the point of this was comparing like NVIDIA's RTXGI to Epic's out-of-the-box features in UE5. Statements were made like that's not fair because you're using TSR versus DLSS, and it's heavy, it's garbage, it's whatever. In previous videos, including my 8th Gen talk, I've basically said like don't use TSR. I wasn't trying to imply that you should use TSR. It was basically saying, here's UE4 with DLSS, like NVIDIA's tech. Here's UE5 with Epic's tech. And it's comparing a way to get GI and upscaling with hardware ray tracing in UE4 to UE5. Now, I know that's not apples to apples. Another thing too, I want to apologize because these assets were a part of the series, and I was migrating stuff from UE5 back to UE4. I migrated stuff from UE5 into Godot. Like, this series has been a 6-part series. These assets have been a part of that. And what I realized is in one of my series, I went and modified texture resolutions on these assets that were in this level that were a part of the bunker as well. So like the texture resolutions were cut back on one of the projects, but it wasn't on the other. But I resolved that and essentially cleared both projects of those bunker assets. And now if you look in UE5 and we come over here and we look in UE4, everything has been restored to its former glory. So let's put it like that. Like, we will have none of that shenanigans happening here. All of the lights, everything, the camera placement, it is all going to be one-to-one, transform to transform, pixel to pixel, the same assets across both of these, with lights being in the same relative position across both projects. So some people went as far as to say I was trying to be malicious or whatever. Like, it was never my intent. I want to make that clear. It was never really and believe me, I've been at this a really long time. All right, plugins. It is never my intent, and I love UE5. Like, I have tons of UE5 videos, so I'm not trying to be malicious or like lean anyone in any type of way. My number one video was like, hey, here's this thing. It offers GI on UE4. Here's how you can use it. It can get you near the same quality at a really performant cost in UE4, right? That was it. And then there was this isn't really useful because we don't have a one-to-one comparison with what this pipeline would even look like in UE5 or what these assets would look like in UE5. So the part 2 of the video was trying to address that. It was like basically me going, yeah, you're right. You know what? It's unless you've been a part of my series and you've seen these assets before in UE5 when I've been working on that or whatever, you don't really have a relative gauge with the performance of UE5 and these assets. So I was trying to do like a favor of being like, hey, let me open these assets up in UE5 and let you guys look at them and scrutinize them in its out-of-the-box feature set. And then it was like, I guess it rubbed people the wrong way and was like, well, this isn't really apples to apples. And truth be told, like, UE5's been in development an additional 5 years. It's got technologies and things aligned and features that it has constraints that UE4 doesn't. And as I go through this process, you're going to see some of those constraints. I'm going to let it be a surprise to you. But if you're familiar with my channel, I've literally talked about some of these constraints, and they will literally pop up during this process as we kind of go through this journey. So hope you enjoy it. Sit back and relax, and we're going to start working through this. So, just so you guys know, we'll show the complexity here for because I'm a person that wants to give people information about what it is we're working with here. So shader complexity is like essentially dirt freaking cheap. Nothing's going on here crazy. We go back to lit mode. Let's do quad overdraw for you people that are concerned about nanite, right? So not too shabby, like a little bit of stuff over here. We're still in the green. We don't have any pinks or reds or anything dangerous happening. So pretty basic scene. These assets are pretty reasonable, even in UE4 terms. So if we look at my screen percentage, you can see I have it at 100%. Nothing in DLSS is enabled right now. This is going to be just TAA, and whenever I pull up the stats here, you will see it's just going to be a normal 100% TAA scene. Now, quick note for those that are going to scrutinize this apples to apples. UE4 is an SM5 DirectX 12 or DirectX 11 renderer. I have, in order to support DLSS and RTXGI, moved away from the default DirectX 11 path, which I've covered in my videos on HN, to DirectX 12. So this will be, for some cards, 30 series, 40 series, 50 series, a lighter draw than what it is on my 20 series card, because a 20 series card does not have DX12 Ultimate power extensions, and it doesn't have the memory capacity of the later RTX cards. However, still not going to be that problematic. Keep in mind also, UE4 is SM5. It cannot do SM6, and that will come up later as we're going through the UE5 stuff. So if we come over here, we're just so you guys know, we're not doing ray tracing right now. This is just a standard base pass deferred scene. Nothing else is going on, and this will give us a really solid foundation between UE4 and UE5, all things equal, right? So not all of these light settings, everything is one-to-one, no worries. You're going to get what you get here. You're going to get what you get in UE5. So now what I do want to do is I don't want to do this while I have these two guys open. So we're going to close this out, and we're just going to hit play here. And we are going to pop this bad boy open. And also, in my previous videos, someone had mentioned the FOV is different for first-person characters in UE4 versus UE5. That is correct. So I tried my best to do a third-person character that shares a common FOV across both projects to better give comparative stats between the two. And again, this wasn't supposed to turn into this kind of thing, but it appears that that's what people wanted out of this, and I'm trying to do my due diligence to give you a more accurate, detailed, technical rundown of this. So we'll do stat FPS, and we'll do t.max FPS, and we will uncap my frames. And yeah, with TAA in UE4, no upscaling, 100%. Let's go do screen percentage, and we'll just hit enter, and we will look at it. 100% screen percentage. Everything's on Epic. We are at around 300 draws, 1,000 primitives walking through the scene, well over 200 frames per second. SM5, and we are in DirectX 12 RHI. Yeah, and we have a little bit of shimmer and TAA stuff happening on that grate down there, but not much. And we have a relatively stable image. We have soft shadows coming off of the shadow maps that are being done there. Let's go ahead and walk up here. And in the SM5 shader model, we get shadows at about here, right? So that's normal shadow map behavior. UE4 doesn't have any VSMs, so we're not dealing with that cost. It is what it is. We have stayed relatively over 200 frames a second on UE4 with OBS running. Now, we will do the same thing, same scene, same everything. I'm going to shut this down. And remember, there's no ray tracing, there's no DLSS, there's no RTXGI. This is just a basic scene, normal shadows, 1-to-1. And we're going to do the same thing in Unreal Engine 5. Now, I want to do the same thing in Unreal Engine 5 without changing anything from its default of what you would get out of the box. And then I'm going to take it again. I've covered these. I've rained this beast all the way down to freaking mobile. So we're going to start with out of the box, which is Software Ray Trace Lumen DX12 with SM5 with virtual shadow maps. That's what's out of the box. That's what comes default with UE5. And this is going to validate or reiterate why people say, don't take this engine out of the box and expect it to perform like UE4, because it's just not going to happen, right? It also goes back to me saying, like, optimization means different things. UE5 might be a beast and have this upfront overhead, but this bad boy will scale way higher than what UE4 will without as much work. That's just truth. It has pipelines in place that will allow you to scale into much larger worlds with large world coordinates and deal with much larger triangle counts, etc., than what UE4 can. However, it comes at an upfront cost. So that's your trade-off. You got to start reining this bad boy in from its defaults if you want it to perform anywhere close to what UE4 can out of the gate. Actually, we're just going to do this. We'll type in anti-aliasing. So by default, you're going to be running TSR, which people don't throw me over the coals. I know. Even in my previous videos, I've said this TSR is garbage. It is what it is. Like, the point of the video there with me comparing DLSS to TSR was basically saying there's other solutions to accomplish the same thing at a cheaper price. But we'll start here because that's what's there. Also, we need to check ray tracing because by default, ray tracing is not on. So we're going to turn this off. We're going to turn off, ray trace shadows is off. All of this is off. I'm going to pause the video because I don't want you guys waiting. We are back. Things are recompiling. Okay. The other thing too is we got to check our SM6 level because we got to make sure we're here. Yep, that's the defaults. And we got to check shadow maps because by default, virtual shadow maps is on. Now, someone made in the comment the other day, like, to ensure I had virtual shadow maps enabled. I did not change shadow maps from virtual shadow maps into cascade shadow or into normal shadow maps. So for that video, for whoever that guy was that was asking that question, this is to clarify that virtual shadow maps were running in that video. And technically, we can pull up the docs here. Virtual shadow maps, the goals of virtual shadow maps is to work with nanite geo. We don't have any nanite in the scene. UE4 handles normal shadow maps. From a speed perspective, virtual shadow maps are heavier than cascade shadow maps for normal geometry. VSMs also do soft shadowing with ray tracing, but again, this is a heavier pass, not a cheaper one. Like, this is more high quality shadows, more high quality stuff, not better performing things. And again, if you go look into Lumen and Nanite's documentation, you'll see that hardware ray traced Lumen is not accelerated. Don't get it twisted. RTXGI with hardware ray tracing is an acceleration of GI using RT cores. Lumen software ray tracing in Unreal Engine's implementation is a form of GI that uses software only and not hardware, and it is the faster of the two methods. When you turn hardware ray trace Lumen on, they've made it in 5.6 faster than it was previously, but it's still a quality improvement that gives you additional features and does not accelerate what's already enabled. That's also inherently just a misconception. So if you haven't watched the talks, nanite is not always the answer. Go watch them. Area's a great dude. He's just gone over that. VSMs are heavier than CSM or shadow maps in general, regardless of whether you're using nanite or non-nanite. By their nature, VSMs by default are heavier. They're almost impossible to use classical shadow maps on nanite. You have to have SM6 and VSMs enabled for that. So that's back to the whole subject matter of scaling out large. In a little bitty scene like what we're doing, this doesn't really matter. But for the sake of keeping all defaults, we're going to keep that on for a second. And yeah, we're going to make sure that our screen percentage is set to 100. We're going to full screen here. And we're going to do the same thing. Stat unit, stat FPS. And doesn't look like I need to do a Tmax because I'm capped out at 60 something frames per second. And over here on the right, you can see my render resolution is set to 100. Now, if you watch the shadow quality as we traverse this scene with virtual shadow maps, it's you know, it's pretty good, but I want you to keep in mind what this looks like as it traverses through like reflections, etc., and go back and look at the previous video, and you'll see like I said, like things kind of deteriorate underneath the grate as you go off in the distance over there. And keep in mind, this is did I verify we're in SM6? I think I did. Yeah, we're in SM6. So this is SM6 Virtual Shadow Maps DX12. So that's an important factor that I'm going to talk about here in a second. I've done this in previous videos where I've broken out the shader cost of SM6 versus SM5 and even SM5 versus SM5 across UE5 and UE4. The reality is you're chewing on heavier stuff in UE5. The vertex calculations, the shader calculations, just for a basic albedo is heavier in UE5 than it is in UE4. So yeah, without doing anything, 100% screen resolution with TSR, and if I stat GPU, you're going to see that a huge portion of this cost is coming from running native res with TSR enabled. So temporal super resolution is eating up an entire 2.6 milliseconds of our total frame time. So, it is what it is. Let's close that out. So, if we were aiming for 60 frames per second, right now with software Lumen, with 100% screen resolution with TSR, UE5 defaults out of the gate. See, I just got some shadow and pop in right there and some traversal stutter. There it went again. You see what I'm saying? And that's VSMs. So pay attention to this and watch when we change back to normal shadow maps. And then here at the end of the hall, it's going to end up doing the same thing. You're going to see some shadow pop. Boom, there it went. And then we get it as we approach like closer and closer to the door at a certain area. I think it's like right there. Yeah, right there. But yeah, we're 5 frames over our frame budget for a 60 hertz game right here versus, where we started with the defaults coming from UE4. Now, again, to be non-biased and to not get raked over the coals, there are things we can do about this, right? And I can tell that you guys, like, that's what you wanted. Versus like the way that the video was broken down before, like it seems like, we wanted to go on this journey. So we'll go to anti-aliasing and we will go to TAA, which is what UE4 has. And again, my previous videos have talked about how to clean TAA up. So if you don't want crazy ghosting, you want different sample rates, or you want a different frame weight on your TAA, I've done that there. and we'll hit play with just switching from TSR to TAA, and we're back up to 70 and some change, 66, 70 and some change. So like that gave us our 2 milliseconds back that we were missing from I said 2.6 milliseconds worth of total frame time. So we're technically now at budget. We can't afford any game logic. We can't afford any AI. We're going to have to be really careful about how we apply extra things until we get down here to the end of the hallway where, you know, we get closer to like 10 extra frames per second. But yeah, that's where we are in this scene with basically VSMs, TAA. The only thing we've tossed away was we have GI because this is a Lumen based scene. So with SM6. Now let's get into the nitty gritty. So if I for a second open up UE4 alongside this because I want you guys to see this. And again, I've done this in previous videos. I'm not going to chew up too much time on it, but we're going to pick one of these boxes as an example, and we'll go open its material up. And I'll quickly just like move something around and hit apply so we can make sure that we are getting all of the instructions recalculated. And then I'll open up UE4. And we will do the same thing. We will go to the bunker and we will find this box and we will come down, open this material up. We will move something. I didn't mean to do that. We will move something around and we will hit apply and we will have its instruction count. Now, we are in SM6 on Unreal Engine 5, and we are in SM5 on Unreal Engine 4. And if you see here, the base pass shader cost is 130 instructions versus 223. The materials are identical. Nothing about them is different. In SM6, your base pass volumetric light map cost is 208 versus 273. Your base pass shader cost is 46 versus vertex shader versus 153. So SM6 is just heavier than SM5. And the funny thing is that would be okay other than the fact of like SM5 and UE5 is actually still heavier than UE5. And I wanted to show you this first in SM6 before we do this because now I'm about to show you something interesting. And again, I have covered this in previous videos, but let's go ahead and grab out a little basic shape. So let's go to shapes, let's go to cube, and we will go to level prototype and then grab this glow material. And as you can see, Lumen is working, right? It's in the scene. We're in 5.6. All's hunky-dory in the world. We have software ray trace Lumen. Again, this is relevant because in this scene, in this bunker, UE5 has no global illumination. If I was to do that right now, and I was to pull a material out, same one, and we was to put this glow on here, there is no GI. It's just a bloom. It is just reflections on the ground on that little wet spot right there, and it's just bloom. There's no GI. There's no light coming off of this against the wall at all. It's just reflections. That's it. No no glowing, no GI. Which the reflections don't look too bad. But yeah, that's going to be relevant here in a second. So we will come to UE5. And as you can tell, when this thing gets in this area, Lumen, this stuff is like glowing. It's not just reflections over the water. Like if I was to pull this thing over this wet puddle over here, you know, and I see these reflections glowing right here, you know, it's a much different situation over here. So we'll go. I just wanted to see how this thing looked over here real quick. Yeah, not too shabby. Different specular properties, it appears, but about the same. But yeah, definitely no actual GI bleeding onto the box here. No light. And that's because DDGI volume in the scene is not enabled. Can't visualize any probes. Nothing's enabled. I haven't actually turned anything on. This is just a standard scene. So yeah, if we go back to UE5 and we say, okay, project settings, and we go to SM6. Sorry, this is the wrong Unreal Engine. Project settings, SM6. We turn this off, and we're going to restart this, and we're going to save it.
They're in the Inferno.
We go back to the bunker. Boom. Two things happen. First thing that happens is it tells me, hey, you're now in shader model 5 and SM6 is required for virtual shadow maps, right? So we got to go change that. Second thing that happens is Lumen is no longer working. We're not getting any GI off of any surfaces at all. This can be changed. We can have software ray trace Lumen back. I've actually covered this again, like way back in the gap where I said Lumen support is back for SM5 back here whenever 5.6 first came out. And then I actually covered it going even further back where I'm like, hey, you can do this code change. I have this PR open to actually fix Lumen in Unreal Engine 5.5. And then I actually had, you know, a PR and a feedback to Epic Games where they were talking, like they kind of just took it out. They were talking about it, but then they actually just took it out on the heels of the change they made in Fortnite where SM5 and DX11 no longer had Lumen. But I basically had a video that's like Lumen is broken in 5.5, but I don't want to waste too much time on that. It's right here. 5.5.1 Lumen no longer working in DX11 SM5. So anyway, just wanted to show you guys this, and yeah, we're gonna delete this from the scene. I'm gonna close Unreal Engine 4. That's fine. And the reason why is because actually, let me shift escape here because I want to give you guys an apples to apples, or as apples to apples as it can be. SM6 is disabled. Shadow maps. We will change to shadow maps. All right. We don't need this open in our face anymore. And we are going to do a stat unit. We are going to do a stat FPS. We are going to do a T.max FPS 1500. Now, I technically didn't need to do that because I wasn't like, you know, frame capped. I'm technically under my monitor's refresh rate. But this is essentially, aside from running chaos, this is an SM5 shader model scene. Lumen is not enabled because they disabled it in SM5 deferred rendering, and this is running TAA at 100% render resolution, and I'm still between the two, running 50 or so frames per second under what I was getting out of the the UE4 space, which was technically the same setup. No Lumen, no GI, no nothing. It's just that's that scene. This is this scene. The only thing that is different in Unreal between the two is that the AO method between UE5 and Unreal Engine 4 is a little different, and the lighting in SM5 is handled a little different. And the shaders themselves, again, like if I, as I compared last time, if we was to open, even now that I've changed SM5, these guys will be cheaper. Move this around. These guys will be cheaper than what they were in SM6, but they still will be. Let me pull this over. More expensive than 427 if you compare each one of these passes. So, of course, we were 200 and something. This was 197. This is 167. So we are actually cheaper for the same material across the two different shader models, which we were here. I don't need this anymore. If we come here and we go to the same material, cancel, open this up, move something around, apply, save. All right. And we look at these side by side. 167 still more expensive. 197 still more expensive. 140 on the base pass volumetric light map. This surface light map is more expensive. It doesn't look like UE5 has the volumetric light pass mentioned, but then the vertex shader is 140 versus here is 46. So there's obviously additional costs. There's velocity instructions in UE5 that it's handling for stuff outside of just normal motion blur. That just did not exist in UE4. That was later having to be accounted for temporal upscaling and such. So, yeah. Even with SM5, we're not technically apples to apples simply because the shader is just more expensive. So that thus you have a little bit more expensive pass, and we're not going to see 200 frames per second even without Lumen enabled in SM5. Now, so in the vein of, putting each version of the engine's best foot forward, so to speak, what we can do is if you come back, here and you look at this video where I say Lumen is back in 5.6, there's instructions here that you can follow with a CVAR. Right here, r.lumen supported SM5 equals 1. So you can just come to your project. We'll close out this real quick. We'll come to the config. We'll go to default engine and down. That's the 427 version. I'm like, why does that look different? Default engine. We'll come down to rendering settings and we'll do r.lumen SM. I think it's supported 5 = 1. save this. So we already know that, like, you know, no software ray traced Lumen, just deferred versus deferred, normal shadow maps, etc., same assets. We already know, like, it's not the same frame rate. We're running a little bit more heavy. However, we're still 100 and something frames per second. We're still within a pretty good frame budget. Now if we take that cube, drag it back out here, and we come to this level prototyping material, we sling this bad boy on here. Oops, that was not the place I wanted to put the material. You can see that we not only are glowing, but we're now illuminating the scene, right? So Lumen is back enabled in SM5. We still don't have hardware ray tracing enabled. We're just using normal shadow maps instead of VSMs. There again, this is DirectX 12, but since SM5 works, for my card, I could go back to DX11 and get even more performance out of this and keep Lumen. But for the sake of DX12 versus DX12 on the same hardware, etc., and I don't want to create a stir, we're just going to continue down the course of path that we're on real quick. We'll do stat unit. We'll do stat FPS. And you guys, I know this is running long. I'm trying to not make it run that long. And we technically, if I do stat GPU, I'm pretty sure we're on TAA. Yeah, we're not doing, yep, we're in TAA 0.17. So that's fine. And we're 70 frames, so we're 5 to 10 frames over our total game budget with software ray trace Lumen at 100% resolution. Not too shabby with TAA. Not too shabby. We could eat 5 to 10 frames on average. And there's that door that we were speaking of, right? I'm going to come back here. So way back here, we got that transition. And then it pops. So it doesn't look like it is a VSM versus a shadow map thing. Looks like it's just happening regardless. So that was just something I guess I didn't notice as much. Now here along that wall, I did see a shadow pop, but it didn't appear to be as prevalent as it was with VSMs. Yeah, it's there though. And then this door here.
I'm opening this one.
Yeah, way back here before it fades out. Came in about right there. Yep. So the image is pretty stable with TAA. It's not horrible. This is not TSR. This is just plain old TAA. It's a little blurry. We could clean this up a little bit. I don't need SSR. I need R.temporal. We'll change the samples to like 4. Yeah. R. Where's current frame rate? There we go. 0.4. There we go. Much sharper. Now, anytime you tweak your AA settings, you run the risk of introducing some noise. Right now, like if you look down there, the screen is drastically sharper than the blurry mess that was just here. Drastically. But I can also see with my sample rate that I'm getting a little bit of micro jitters on specularity. It's not enough for me to, like, I would rather be closer to super sharp than be a blurry mess and ghosting all over the place when I walk around. So yeah, we're 9 frames over budget, 70 frames. We have enough overhead to do some stuff. this isn't that bad, and we got software ray trace Lumen, and we're in SM5 cut back all the way down. Now, let's take this a little further, but I mean, we're still, I mean, nowhere near 200 frames that we saw in the first video, right? So let's take this further to continue to answer questions for people that was asking. Well, you know, your ray tracing, which we're not right now. We're in SM5. Here's the thing. UE4 can ray trace in SM5. UE4 can ray trace with the current settings that we have set up for RTXGI. But watch this. And that's another thing. Like, people wouldn't know. Just anybody wouldn't know. Oh, I got to go and modify SWRT settings just to bring Lumen back to SM6. But let's go find ray tracing, shall we? It's like, okay, what if I want to use ray tracing in UE5? And we want to do ray trace shadows for direct lighting, and we want the cheaper Lumen model. And yeah, we're good with that. And I'll pause this for you. I actually shouldn't have to recompile shaders for that. So here we go. Boom. Guess what? In order to do ray tracing, you need to go to the heavier shader pipeline. So this goes back to the Embark video that I was speaking on, where it's like, you know, some studios are doing things to get around these directions that Epic are bringing things in. This isn't like anyone trying to like paint a picture or like hoodwink someone or articulate some kind of like weird perception in the people's minds. Like, this is it is what it is. So yeah, we need to go back into our project settings in order to have ray tracing turned on, and we have to go back to the, you know, basically SM6, which is fine, but we were already cutting it pretty close, right? So now we need to re-enable this and restart. All right. And now we're approaching the reason why pretty much 99% of all games that support hardware ray tracing has an upscaler. If they were made in UE5. So with the heavier shader model, and keep in mind, I have not changed back to virtual shadow maps just yet. I'm still in Cascade, or not Cascade, but just normal shadow maps. So you're not going to see the soft shadow penumbra. You're not going to see the VSM, basically high quality shadows. You're going to get a closer shadow to what you see in UE4, right? Where that dark line is pretty hard. It's just basically a hard shadow. And if we walk over here, and while I'm doing this and talk, like, come on, walk and talk, Jason, walk and talk. So if we do this, let's do t.max FPS and stat FPS. So we're at 45 frames per second. This is, again, with TAA, not TSR, 50 frames per second. And if we come over here, you see that the shadow between RTXGI and the shadow here with normal shadow maps, ray trace shadows, act the same between UE4 and UE5. The reason why the original video had better shadow casting, or like a denoiser on these shadows to begin with ray tracing enabled, is because virtual shadow maps were enabled and it was using the higher quality shadow map, which, you know, if we lean on TAAU here, I can go r.screen percentage, and again, it's not DLSS, but it's cheaper. We could do r.screen percentage 65, and we have a pretty noisy hallway down there, and temporal jitter is, you know, in our scene a little bit. But it's not horrible for the quality that you're getting, and we're at 65% with TAAU, which I am fairly surprised by. With hardware ray tracing, we are now over the frame budget to be able to play this game pretty stably. And we just have to deal with the, you know, the reconstruction happening from the upscaling on TAAU to some degree, or pay for TSR for a slightly sharper image, unless we go implement something like DLSS or FSR. So is what it is, basically. But yeah, the image quality here, like if we turn around and we look, this is much closer to what I was seeing with shadows on the inset here and the fall off values. It's pretty decent. I really enjoy the fact that Lumen is not bleeding light through to the underside of those shafts right there. So, you know, hardware ray traced Lumen is there must be a collision there, is a little bit cleaner in the GI implementation, but there is still a lot of denoising happening underneath that gray due to the screen percentage setting. But that, again, that happens in normal games, like outside of UE5. So let's look at this reflection again. Yeah, and it's just noisy. I mean, it is what it is. You don't have ray reconstruction on Lumen, even with hardware. I would have to go to high quality ray traced reflections to clean that up and get a higher quality. But in the vein of like performance, we're not really wanting to push it too much. We're pushing into 100 frames. So interesting number, 100 frames, right? On the rasterizer, without upscaling, without a hardware ray tracing with GI, we're 50 frames or so, average almost 100 frames in some areas, more expensive than UE4. And I'm pretty certain that when we get done going through this with UE4, even after the hardware ray tracing is turned on, at 65%, we're going to end up seeing a very similar number across the board. Like we already did it without anything, no GI, no nothing with TAA. So we'll see what it's like once we kind of walk up the scale there. So the only other thing left for UE5 is let's go ahead and turn virtual shadow maps back on, because I don't want to leave any stone unturned with that. Do. What? There we go. And I'm trying to see if there's a huge quality difference on the way the shadows are falling off on ray traced. I mean, I can see a little bit, but I also see noise. But they are, I mean, some of their edges are really, really crisp and hard. We'll see when we get around the edge over here. So apparently this shadow that was over here was literally just a difference in the lighting mechanism of what was being cast between the two scenes, because the lights right here likely had a different size between the two scenes, which was creating that noise. So yeah, my bad. That was due to inaccuracies on the scene between the two of those. Not intended whatsoever. I'm not seeing a huge difference between VSMs with ray trace direct lighting. And I'm sure with VSMs I could go and like actually adjust the quality of them individually to get more penumbra fall off on some of these shadows, and more softness around the edges. Yeah, there's a little bit of flickering happening right there too. But that looks like Z fighting. But not so shabby. Even with VSMs turned on, it didn't really impact the performance at all. But there's likely, a reason for that is that the shadow quality for ray traced direct lighting hasn't been adjusted at all, and I don't want to start playing around with that too much. But it's good to see that you can just take these two. You could take that setting as is and flip it on with ray tracing, and it's not really going to impact your performance that much. And then again, remember this is at 65% with TAA, and we've just avoided TSR altogether. Now that hardware ray tracing is on, let's do that. Yeah, 70 frames at 65. I mean, yeah, still noise down here. I don't know why they pushed this so hard. Like, this is almost like obvious, like, and I know I've said this like a ton of times before, but like, it's here you have it. Don't use it. Like, just no. I need my little like Bugs Bunny meme. Like, no. All right, so we've worked all the way through this. We're gonna go the other direction now. So we've already done a baseline pass with like nothing in UE4. We can delete this glowing guy since we know that we don't have any GI in the scene. We're not doing anything special. We can redo this just to kind of go through this step again. T dot max FPS. All right, so nothing's changed. What? No, like typed 100 by accident. Max FPS. There we go. We already know that like we're 190 something, 200 frames per second in this scene. With, come on, you go away. All right. Without any GI whatsoever, it's just standard deferred rendering with TAA. 230, 250. We're getting pretty far up there. And this is, we know like a transform 1-to-1 427 to UE5, like nothing's changed. Even the character is the same, and this is our initial frame rate throughout this whole thing, right? So now in order to start approaching a place where we need to approach to get GI and stuff enabled, I'm gonna hit escape. We are going to start passing in some commands. We need to enable the global illumination experimental plugin, and we need to enable actually, we're going to have to do this again because we don't have hardware ray tracing enabled in the project settings. So that's something else. Hardware. Wait, ray tracing.
This is also the square.
So let's go ahead and restart. If this starts compiling, I'm going to throw something at the wall. Nah, I was going to pause it. But yeah, sometimes this guy makes me feel this way. You can do it. Yay. Come here. Now I did see some hardware reflections there, but so I do know it's working. Hardware ray tracing at least is working. But we're gonna go now enable this global illumination experimental plugin.
No.
And we will now enable DDGI, not NGX, RT, yeah, 1. And then we'll find our probes. By the way, the probes being the scene, if anything, it was going to cost me extra having them here. It's not really helping me. So, like, yeah, I know they were here and they're not in, it's not technically in the UE5 build, but I mean, the class doesn't even exist over there. I just copy the map and there's basically, hey, we don't have this class. So, let's see. Again, walk and talk, Jason. You can do it. Let's clear the probes out real quick. Looks good. We will change it from runtime static because I want it to be low. We want it to be dynamic. And then let's go grab some geo real quick. And then let's go get the level prototyping material. And yeah, we now have, well, if I wasn't trying to drag nothing, we now have actual GI in the scene, illuminating the scene. As subtle as it may be, it is here, and it is actually working. It does behave differently than Lumen. You're not going to get the same quality in the GI as you would from Lumen, but you do indeed get illumination and ray traced reflections from emissives in your scene. Again, not the same as UE5's Lumen's quality, but you also get light behavior and GI behavior in here that you otherwise would not get if this was turned off. Like right here, you can see as soon as I turn it on, the light bleeds around this corner and illuminates this corner right there. This is what DDGI offers. Now, this is the same exact scene. Like no light's values have been manipulated between the two. And it has been mentioned that like these scenes don't even look the same. That is correct. They don't. In order to get this scene looking like Unreal Engine 5 scene, you would have to manipulate the tone mapper. You would have to change your lighting values. You would have to work within the way that Unreal Engine 4 ray tracing and DDGI expects your lights to be to get a look that is that way. That's just UE5 doing what UE5 does. This is UE4 doing what UE4 does. Within that space, within that color space, etc., you can still approach both looks and adjust things to get the style or the look that you want to have. I'm not totally mad at this. Some people said it looks like it's too lit up. and you know that could necessarily be true. I also see that I have a texture streaming pool budget flashing at me, so we're going to reload this map because it appears that something is going on. Let me just restart you. There we go.
Okay.
Um,
Did you want to try the Goblin Cave?
make sure these were saved. Yeah, that's saved. That's saved.
But I clicked it.
Yeah, we're good. So these are actually doing things that we need. All right. So we're just going to start here. Like nothing else has needed to be modified. We enabled ray tracing. Here's our ray per probe count. If we visualize the probes, we need to, oh, I restarted. We need to actually re-enable the freaking thing. I was wondering why. I was like, I got a little bit of a flicker, but I didn't get any actual GI from it. I was like, man, this, okay, you don't have really much going on over here, don't you? So we'll do that. All right, now, yeah, it's working now. That's a lot different than what it was. It's so subtle too. Like it's so weird how that just having it here. I wonder if I should increase. Well, we can talk about that later. Increase in the probe count. Let's go to unlit. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, my probes are showing up, so we're good. Yeah, so we're if we're on the other side of here, you can see the DDGI is actually working. Again, it is very, very subtle in a very lit scene like this. Probably not ideal to be lit like this, but again, I just copied these assets directly over and we just kind of rocked with it. So let me hit F11 here and we will start getting the stat stuff going. And again, this video's ran really long and I apologize for that. Yeah, so 100% scaling with this hardware ray tracing turned on, and we're still busting over 100 frames per second. So if I did r.screen percentage and just hit enter and then went like this, you can see it's 100, right? So this is without DLSS. This is just this scene running with hardware ray tracing and DDGI enabled. That's it. That's pretty much it. And we are well within a solid frame rate. And it doesn't look as good as Lumen, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious that Lumen probably has features and availability in UE5 to surpass the dynamic GI look that you would get from UE4 with DDGI. However, I will say, when comparing the two and looking at the performance difference between the two, and having shadows that aren't popping as I'm walking through my scene, and having this low cost ray traced shadowing throughout my entire scene, as well as a GI method that offers me GI in my scene. At this performance, I'm not, even with the little freaking temporal aliasing that's happening here, I'm not super mad at this. Like, this is my preference, where I take the two and I'm like, okay, I can work with this. I can adjust this scene to look the way that I want it to look. And I just didn't want to doctor anything. I want it to be exactly what it was, 1-to-1 over and over. We can compare color values, compare transforms, compare everything across these two scenes. They are identical. And I just wanted to be very transparent with all of that, even though they do look completely different. So yeah, this is just TAA, right? So if we wanted to, which I noticed there was still some probes. I don't want these probes showing. So if we wanted to, we can come here and we can do X. We can do DLSS enable. And then now we have DLSS instead of just TAA. And this is pretty much native, I'm assuming. So like if I... Yeah, pretty much native. 100 and something frames per second. And DLSS does a pretty good job of cleaning the image up and getting rid of a lot of the like the DLLA. The DLAA method is pretty decent at its native res. But if I wanted to boost my performance, let's just say that we did screen percentage 60. You know what? I forgot with the with this we have to do I can't remember if I can actually do this here or if I got to do it at the... Yeah, we can do it here. So with DLS, let me see, stat. Yeah. So your DLSS cost is going to be around 50 0.50 milliseconds. It's more expensive than TAA. TAA was coming at about 0.16, but it's well below the 2 millisecond cost that we were having in for TSR in Unreal Engine 5. So not mad at that. And of course at if we look at our screen percentage at 65, the quality difference between native and DLSS at 65 is not really that big of a difference, and the image is pretty stable off in the distance over there. I'm just, in motion I could see where it has like a little bit of crawl, but I mean, just relatively speaking, between this and between Unreal Engine, performance wise and everything, like, everyone's gonna have their preferences. Everyone's gonna, like, for video games, I feel like this is a better sweet spot versus pushing towards what UE5, the weight and the load that it takes to go that direction. I have a ton of headroom here left to work within these constraints, even with full-blown hardware ray tracing, is I guess what I'm trying to articulate. But anyway, Thanks for sticking around through this journey. I hope that that's addressed some people's concerns and has, reshined some lights on some things. Sorry that the freaking video took so long. If you'd like, hit that like and subscribe button. Check out the Discord in the description of the video. Until next time, happy developing and toodles.